Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined this week by my friend in soccer, Stuart Holkgren, for a jam-packed Flyover Footy. The highs and lows of preseason, I don't think can hit any harder than what's happened this week. Stu, I was thinking back to last weekend after our last show when I had Justin on, and I think the next biggest news that happened after our last show was Daniel Edelman was signed a new contract through June 2030. And last weekend, the vibes were high, right?
Yeah, vibes were positive. We had announced Conrad Wallem had come back.
Which we're going to get to. Like, all that is going to be in this episode. But my goodness, this week has taken a turn. Has it not?
Yeah. Every day seems to have a new little a nugget, as it were, for us to just fester in our lives. This has not been a fun week so far.
No, thank you for joining us, though, on the live stream, on YouTube, if you're watching this afterwards, on Twitter, wherever you might be catching this. We appreciate you joining us this and every week. I think we're pretty much back into weekly rotations, whether it's live or pre-recorded, because, I mean, if this week's anything, the news isn't going to stop. Corey Ray, Diego Gigliani, Yohan Demay, all of them are hard at work. Things are changing almost by the hour at this point, and we will have everything. We're going to bring everything to you on this episode. We have an active chat that we're getting going here, and I keep forgetting to put that on the screen. There you go. I'm going to blow that up a little bit since Stu doesn't have his camera on.
Yeah, just take over all of the second half of this one.
There we go. All right, clicking buttons. Anyway, we've got Klauss, we've got Wallem, we've got Edelman, we've got the roster, we have our transfer tracker that is being updated by the day, we have MLS news, all of that's coming on this episode. We've got Stu for the next about hour and 10 minutes, I think. So it should be a good show. Stu, are you ready to get going?
Absolutely. Let's start this therapy session.
And just before we get going, just on the live stream, I'll try to mention it sometime during the show. But I do have a Blue Jay Brewing Therese, which is their German-style amber lager. And Blue Jay Brewing will proudly host us for another live show on the 19th of February, Thursday, around 7 o'clock. Still working out the details. So make plans to join us. It's going to be fun. Last year was a blast. This year will hopefully be bigger. It should be a fantastic way to kick off the season, of which we're going to talk about in just a second. Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. My name is Matt Baker, joined this week by my friend in soccer, Stuart Holkgren, for another Flyover Footy looking at preseason for St. Louis City. There's not a whole lot else going on. It's just preseason matches. It's the excitement of facing Red Bull New York this coming Saturday. We have a new signing to discuss, Conrad Wallem. We have a contract extension in Daniel Edelman. We have MLS roster rule news at some point in this episode. Who doesn't love going into those updates that have occurred? City 2 has a new schedule out. We'll look at the transfer tracker for St. Louis. And, oh yeah, on that note, we're going to kick off this episode with the story that has broken the City fan base, almost broken it in two, depending on where you look on the internet and who you ask at what point in time. It was reported this week by the incomparable Tom Bogert that the LA Galaxy are in talks to acquire St. Louis City forward Joao Klauss. Stu, there are a ton of angles to this. I don't think we're breaking any news on this one because I think if folks are listening to Flyover Footy, they are likely aware of what's going on. But just in case they're not, the story that Bogert reported is that Klauss would be a DP for the LA Galaxy. The Galaxy would be sending $2 million to St. Louis in a cash for trade. And they are doing this essentially because Ricky Puig, one of their three designated players, is already out for the season with a season-ending injury before the season started. Still hasn't come back. Re-aggravated an injury when he was training in Spain, and so he's out for the season. The Galaxy are in search for another DP. Right situation at the right time, that depending on how your perspective is here in a minute. And we've got every angle that we're gonna talk a lot about Klauss on this episode. We've got every angle. We're gonna talk about his on-field work, his importance to the fan base, front office dynamics at play, the transfer history for St. Louis, the roster as it looks right now. And we're going to get to some positives about this, no matter how you feel about Klauss. If you think that we're shipping out a player that has underperformed, great, kudos to you. I personally disagree with that. Stu and I are going to give our takes. We're going to look over all the angles. But Stu, I mean, first thoughts on this absolutely massive bit of news.
I mean, first thought is unhappy hearing this news. Klauss, I think, as a value player on the roster, is a great value as a TAM player up top. I think he's been great since he came to St. Louis. It was great seeing him even in 2022, palling around before our first inaugural season. So, yeah, no, if this news would have happened, a month ago, really, if most of the announcements of this offseason happened 6 weeks before they actually did, I would feel a lot more comfortable. But everything is delayed, and it doesn't seem like there's a reason for the delay. Obviously, LA Galaxy weren't going to make this move with Puig being healthy. But no, I don't see any positive in this. What's the positive right now?
Well, the positive, which I think the positive is the bury the lead aspect to this, because knee-jerk reaction, it's hard to see the positive. The positive, I'll go ahead and say that because it's a nice level setting thing. The positive requires a lot of assumptions to this, right? So part of the positive is the fee that the Galaxy would be paying us. $2 million is not insignificant. $2 million incoming transfer fee puts him on the Nico Gioacchini level that broke the city all-time outbound transfer fee. Nico was at $2 million, reported with some escalators that he definitely didn't reach with Como back in 2024. I don't believe, and Transfermarkt has backed me up on this, that we have sold a player for more than that. We're talking about Indiana Vassilev at $1 million, AZ Jackson at almost 900,000 with escalators. Sam Adeniran, all these other players didn't approach this. So this would be borderline record-breaking outgoing transfer fee for St. Louis, or tying Klauss's old striker mate, Nico Gioacchini. That's a positive. The other positive would be, per reporting by Tom Bogert on SoccerWise just on Thursday, it is expected that the club would convert all $2 million into GAM. Every year, I think the latest rules are Major League Soccer teams can convert up to $3 million in outbound transfer fees into general allocation money, which basically means even though this would be a cash for trade, the club would be converting it into money that they have to reinvest in on-field talent, right? So it's taking what we're going to talk about later in the episode. St. Louis has the 5th most amount of GAM right now, which general allocation money, if you boil it down, it is the ability to go above and beyond the salary cap to sign higher priced players in mostly non-special spots, non-DPs, non-U22s. So you are banking more of this. We already have the 5th most. You add 2 million to that, and then you could then look at potentially using the 2 DP 4 U22 roster construction method, which would garner you an additional $2 million in GAM. You're now the number 1 team in GAM in Major League Soccer. That provides flexibility to Corey Ray. That means he has a lot more ability to build a bulk of the roster from the middle around, not looking at DPs, U22s, but just a better top to bottom roster. And the fact that Klauss is on the last year of his contract. His option was triggered last season for this year, so he has nothing else ahead of him for this contract. We are getting value for a player on an expiring contract, and this reminds me of Tim Parker back in 2024, where Lutz sold him to the New England Revolution in exchange for Henry Kessler, a younger player who was making about the same amount of money, all things considered. And it was Parker whose contract was expiring. They couldn't come out into an agreement. So those are the positives to me. It's that we have flexibility that we're getting. We have value we're extracting for a player whose contract is expiring. The problems with this are everything else. In order for this to work, we have to trust that we'll get something in return, which means we don't have that firm answer of this is a valuable deal right now. What it does mean is we have removed a piece, a critical piece to St. Louis City in 2026. Klauss wasn't just our presumptive striker going into 2026. He was our only productive striker going into 2026. He is our all-time leading goal scorer with 27 goals, 6 assists in 85 total matches over 3 years, which include MLS, CONCACAF Champions Cup, and the U.S. Open Cup. And if you remember, if you're an OG from back when, he scored 4 goals and 4 assists in City 2 back in 2022 when he appeared in a few games. He's played for St. Louis for almost 3.5 years. By far, the longest tenure, along with Roman Berkey, Tomas Olstrak, and Edu Leuven. Those 4, and Kyle Hebert, Josh Yarrow, Celio Pompeu, who are actually signed to City 2, not brought in to be on City and then happen to play for City 2. So those 6-7 guys dating back to City 2, that's what Klauss is a part of. He's a part of the core. So there's the on-field aspect, but there's also the importance to fans as one of those 7 players from City 2 back in 2022, one of the first players signed, still arguably the most expensive player signed to St. Louis City from back when. The on-field performance, the impact to the fans, all make this really tough to swallow when you're asking fans to stick with you going into 2026 and knowing that you're in a transition time, but still needing to put a valuable product on the field, still needing to put together a competitive roster. And when you remove a piece like Klauss and you're asking fans to rely on Simon Betcher, who had an abysmal 2025 season, productive in 24 for the back half, but an abysmal 25 season, one of the worst expected goals to goal ratio in the entire league, definitely on City. You're asking them to trust him, an injured Cedric Teuchert, who's just now returning from injury into camp, Caden Glover, who has been on City for 4 years and seen about 63 total minutes in his career, including 0 last season, and Brendan McSorley, who has just been elevated last season into a cameo role as a squad rotation player. We don't have replacement for Klauss. And so at this point in time, with this report being out there, and we are discussing it as if it is a done deal because all signs point to yes, including Klauss himself, essentially liking Tom Bogert's post on Instagram that reported this move. I mean, the lines being read into all over the place. We're about as close to reporting this as fact as you can without it actually being announced by City. That's what we're taking right now. So, Stu, there are more areas to discuss in this, but I mean, which hits harder for you? Is it the loss as far as the on-field performance goes and the lack of replacement, or is it the impact to the fan base where you do have your Klauss detractors who just don't like the fact that he doesn't produce at a 20 goals per season level consistently, that he had his injuries in 2024, but they think he does too much besides scoring goals. There is that little aspect of the fan base. I don't want to diminish them by calling him little, but at the same time, we've talked so much on Flyover about, and other pods have as well, other outlets have as well, about the work that Klauss does that makes him valuable all around, looking at goals added metrics, looking at hold up play, looking at how he links up with others around him. And yes, he can still break lines and be a scoring striker in the box. Is it that on the field, or is it the importance to the fan base as one of those OGs that really, and obviously it could be a combination, but like, where do you see this hitting the hardest in the fan base?
Well, I mean, obviously his on-field performance is fantastic, but the fans need something to be excited about. And as great as Conrad Wallem is, he's not the one who's sexy, to call Klauss sexy out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's putting butts in seats? Again, we're seeing a delay in. Obviously, Ray deserves some time to reset this roster. But why did we wait so long to bring in Ray to reset the roster? Why did we wait so long to reset the roster? Why weren't we starting this process last summer? So right now, the Blues, reality of St. Louis sports is the Blues are bad. The Cardinals are going to be real bad in 2026. And City, who have really kind of been bleeding public attention for the last 2 seasons, are poised to bleed more this year. And I mean, I think that's kind of how is the front office going to combat that? How are they going to grip fans' attentions? How are they going to grip St. Louis and
Mhm.
St. Louis's attention this season. I mean, right now there's, I mean, a new sporting director and a young head coach is not going to do it. I'm sorry, it won't. And if you're waiting until the secondary window opens in July, which they seem to be doing right now to bring in a striker, yeah, I mean, that's halfway through the season already. What are you doing?
Now we should probably get this out of the way because there were a lot of comments when this news broke, saying, "Well, we're getting rid of one striker." We've had the story for the past few weeks out there about another striker on the move who called St. Louis home at one point in his career. What is your take on Josh Sargent as having anything to do with this?
I would imagine, given the timing and what on Soccer Wise today, they said this was talked about in December.
Mhm.
I would say they're disconnected,
Mm.
entirely unrelated. um, I mean, I would be absolutely furious if City did not get more than 50,000 in GAM from Toronto FC for Josh Sargent's MLS rights. I mean, with or without Klauss. Klauss leaving doesn't change that.
No,
Yeah,
that's true. Klaus leaving doesn't change the fact that we need to extract value from having the rights to Josh Sargent because of the allocation order going away and St. Louis having his rights, which we do because of that mechanism. But I want to point out a lot of the reporting that Tom Bogert has done, and he does seem to be all over this. Not going too deep into the Norwich situation and the fact that Sargent is reportedly done with Norwich based on conversations that he's had with the sporting leaders. I kind of want to pick at a comment that Tom Bogert made that Sargent wants to raise his family in Toronto. That's a critical reason after having his third kid that Toronto is appealing. Not just the fact that they're making the offer of 18 mil, which is near what the offer was last summer, and in the ballpark at least of what Norwich would be asking, but it is the off the field things that are seemingly drawing Sargent to Toronto. And the thing that I have not seen at all is any semblance of St. Louis being in the hunt. If St. Louis was legitimately in the hunt to make a competing offer to lure Sargent over, that would be reported. Tom Bogert would have something on that. And it's not just that he's not talking about the compensation that St. Louis would get for Sargent because we have his rights. It's not as cut and dry as Toronto offers 18, St. Louis offers 19, St. Louis gets him. We still operate in a closed ecosystem, single entity MLS. And it seems like essentially, if you want to think about it this way, personal terms have basically been agreed to with Sargent in Toronto. That seems like where it is. I don't know if St. Louis has made a legitimate offer. We talked a big game last summer about being able to offer in the $20 million range, ballpark what Cincy was offering last year, but we haven't heard a peep this winter when this saga is going on. So I kind of want to put to rest as much as we can any semblance that because we're selling Klauss, it's clearing the way for Josh Sargent. That would be an 11th hour miracle for that to happen. And I just don't see it happening based on what we've heard about his desire to go to Toronto. Bogert's even said it's Toronto, nobody else. That's who he wants to go to. So in that conversation, I don't consider Josh Sargent an alternative to Klauss because of the contractual conversations that are going on, the personal terms with Toronto. But I do agree with you that in the conversation of getting compensation, I would say more than 50. I think back to, I think it was Marco Royce. His rights were held by Charlotte, I think, at the time when he went to the LA Galaxy. And I believe they were compensated in the $300,000 to $450,000 range in GAM. So we should be getting something significant in that term. But I'm just asking for a reality check on with the Klauss news and report, assuming that it clears the way for Josh Sargent.
Yeah. Marco Royce, I think, was 400,000. Miguel Almiron, when he came back last year, was 400,000, and Thomas Mueller was 400,000. So that seems to be at least the 2024 going rate. Now, what's the gamflation for 2025? I don't know, but yeah, 400,000 would be the floor for me that I would want personally for Sargent's rights. But and like you said, yeah, if we both make a bona fide offer, Sargent's agreed to terms with Toronto, he's not coming here. That's just what it is. MLS will arbitrate and they'll give us a number and we move on.
There's a comment in the chat that I want to draw attention to for our audio listeners. A Blue One, perhaps only LA wants him at that price. The Puig injury kind of just happened. And I do think this was a perfect scenario for LA. I kind of want to dovetail this into the, I would say, third aspect of this that I want to discuss. We talked on the field a little bit, talked about the impact to the fans. There is another factor at play here that is making the rounds and having some significant sourcing to it that we need to discuss, but it does relate to LA being in the right place at the right time, the right team to offer, almost a desperate team that has been rebuilding since last year and really wants to make a go at it, but losing one of their, if not their absolute critical player in Ricky Puig. By having him go down to an injury, they're now a little bit desperate in this sense. Klauss is on the last year of his contract. So this entire move would only get Klauss to LA for one season on his current contract. If they're paying $2 million to us, plus his $1.3 million salary for one season, for the last season of his contract, well over the DP threshold. They could re-sign him at some, under DP level. That could happen. He could re-sign with LA, but right now he's a designated player for this season, and they're going to have to figure something out if they want to keep him going forward. Now, the rumor mill is ripe. And one of the things that I really pride ourselves here on Flyover is that we're not just going to spew every single rumor, every single comment that's put out there. But if something seems credible, and if it seems credible to me, I will talk about it here. And one of the things that I have talked about on this show months ago related to the, I would say, butting of heads potentially between Klauss and the front office. Last postseason, during postseason training, Klauss, I was reporting, and I stand by it, that Klauss was fined for not appearing at postseason training when the rest of the team was either required or had excused. Some other players, I believe, were excused. Klauss was with his family. He had said he had family commitments during the season, and he was reportedly fined. And I heard that from multiple sources. Now, there are comments going around the internet in multiple areas that I would borderline say independently back this kind of thing up. If you've looked at Reddit, if you looked at other message boards, it's out there that Klauss and Diego were at odds with each other. Klauss wasn't thrilled with the Olaf hire. Who can blame him, though? The comment here says things blew up the offseason. Talked about the training session being conducted, which gets some details wrong in what I've been told. But end of the day, it seems like this could be some issue with the front office that's occurring here. And it's backed up by Nico Moreno, our friend at Sounder at Heart, a little bit, where he posted that, quote, a source added that the striker had already expressed an interest of a potential move away from St. Louis at the end of last season. So if you take Nico and his sources, which are not the same as mine, and you go with what I had said about Klauss being fined at the end of last season, there were issues going into the offseason last year. I'd also heard Klauss wanted a long-term contract in St. Louis. However, that has clearly not happened. City picked up his option and left it at that. So they still had Klauss under club control. Klauss, like I said, liked Tom Bogert's post on Instagram, lending credibility to the theory that he is on his way out and will okay this move. But Stu, this raises questions on, I hesitate to really lean into the word meddling, but the dynamics, we'll say, between the front office with Diego Gigliani, the president GM of St. Louis City, and a player like Klauss. No matter whether it was the fining or some other situation that happened, Klauss expressing an interest per Nico Moreno of a potential move away from St. Louis then picking up his option, and now St. Louis using that option pickup now to apparently flip him for GAM. What does this say to fans about how the front office and the player dynamic is acting as we move into this new-ish era with Corey Ray as the sporting director, but yet still having Diego as the president and GM?
I mean, as a fan, you don't like to hear that. As my new sporting director of the team, I don't want Corey Ray to have to kind of soothe both sides here, both the front office above him and the players that he's working with. Ideally, Corey Ray is the one making these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people have egos. There's going to be politics in every workplace that you go to. I think we all understand that. But we're all, I mean, adults, and you have to treat people with respect. And that I mean, if some of the specifics of what we've heard on him being fined are true, I mean, yeah, that's who wants to play in that environment? Who wants to play for that person? I mean, I don't blame him. So, uh, no, I'm a little PO'd about that.
Mhm.
But we'll see. I mean, these things in St. Louis tend to come out over time, rumors with a grain of truth in them. So we'll see
Yeah.
if anything else comes out.
And honestly, these things happen in sports. We just got done talking about Josh Sargent and disagreements with that front office. And we have potentially our own example to another extent here. It's not unique that some kind of disagreements would happen. And there was another comment in our chat about Klauss making a pay me gesture to the box section in the last home game of last season. And multiple fans have dropped that comment to me, letting me know he was asking to be paid. And it's not just asking to be paid, it's asking to be extended. Proving himself. 27 goals, 6 assists in 85 matches, leading City in goal scoring for 2 of his 3 seasons. 2 of the 3 seasons City has been in existence. And we know that every single player struggled in 2025. So if you have a problem with Klauss's on-field performance, I think you have to have a bigger picture look. Understand that half the season was under Olaf. I would argue a third of the season, the team was struggling to find their identity, to be salvaged by David Critchley, and they were completely broken in what their confidence and their style of play until he managed to turn them around towards the end of the season. And Klauss himself was on a tear towards the end of last season. So it's not just he can play for Carnell, he can play for Hackworth, he can play for Critchley. There's a trend of Klauss being successful. That's the player LA Galaxy, I think, will be getting in this if this deal gets across the finish line at some point, whether it's tomorrow, Friday, January 23rd, or it's next week. It's worth noting Klauss is in training with City in Florida. Was able to confirm that with Yoann Demay on Thursday, earlier in the day of our recording. So he is there as of Thursday, January 22nd. That's not abnormal. So, you know, I was looking earlier, talking to some friends about players who were in camp and noticing, you know, speculating about outgoing, because a couple weeks ago, Stu, if you remember on our show, we talked about likely, unlikely things to happen. I was reminded that I suggested a likely thing would be an outgoing player. I just didn't intend for it to be this outgoing player. But the only player whose presence at training camp tells me anything one way or another is Edu Leuven. The fact that he's at training camp, knowing what his off-field unavailability issues would be, the fact that he's at training camp is a fantastic sign for St. Louis. Anybody else who's at training camp, Nico Gioacchini was at training camp up until the day he was transferred to Como. Indiana Vasilev was with City in training up until the day he was transferred to Philadelphia. So being there doesn't exactly, you know, mean anything as far as they're staying or they're going. And Demay did not comment really anything further on Klauss. But I want to address one other aspect to this, which is if Klauss is being sold, our feelings are pretty clear about our you know, distraughtness or frustration with him being moved, even though there is the objective lens where you have an expiring contract, you're able to extract value. This isn't the first time we've done that, right? We have extracted value from players before on expiring contracts for other off-field reasons, for personality conflicts that have existed. And January and February are prime examples in the past couple of years where this has bit St. Louis in a bad way. Going back to 2024, when we sold Nico Gioacchini in January to Como FC, that happened early in the preseason. We had time. Lutz Pfannenstiel had time to replace Nico Gioacchini. And throughout the winter transfer window, all we were hearing was St. Louis linked to Cedric Teuchert. St. Louis working with Hanover FC, who's in a relegation battle for Cedric Teuchert services. And it ended up not working because we wouldn't meet the price Hanover wanted to pay to sell Cedric Teuchert. We didn't replace Nico Gioacchini in 2024. And we know what happened in 2024. It devolved into the selling of Sam Adeniran, the selling of AZ Jackson, the firing of Bradley Carnell. And I'm not saying it's all predicated on the fact we didn't replace Nico Gioacchini. But when you have such an impact player, a 10-goal scorer the season before, like Nico Gioacchini was, and you don't replace him, it does tend to have a cascade effect. You can't rely on your squad rotation players to inherently just fill a gap in that role. Klauss struggled and then got injured in 2024. So there are a host of things that you could really cite as that being the catalyst to where things just fell off until Cedric Choice had arrived on a free. Fast forward to 2025, you have Bradley Carnell was fired in mid-24. John Hackworth took over. Training camp in 2025. Indiana Vassilev went to the U.S. national team camp the year prior, I think it was, and he was sold like a week before the season started in 2025. So we went through preseason camp with Indiana Vassilev. There were rumblings of interest, of frustration by Vassilev after Carnell had left because he was clearly a Carnell guy. But we sold Vassilev for $1 million. And it was, everybody said it was great. It was great business. Indiana Vassilev wasn't the kind of player who was lighting everybody on fire with goals. He wasn't contributing to goals at an expeditious rate. And we sold him for what a lot of people thought was higher than his value. But we didn't replace his production. We didn't replace his quality on the field. And we struggled at the beginning of that season. Now, Olaf Melberg, his presence, he existed in St. Louis. So there's more to that 2025 season than just losing Indiana Vassilev. And what Olaf was probably going to ask Vassilev to do in his role on the team as either a wingback or depth piece. So there are factors in there, but the fact remains that we sold Vassilev, a key player from the season prior, and we didn't replace him. And then injuries hit. And then we struggled with that. So it's not that Vassilev was a catalyst to the injuries happening, but all of those injuries occurred after we sold him, and he could have stepped in very easily into that role. So I bring these examples up because I am worried at this point that if we take the money and we are mindful, or we are slow rolling it, or we are intentional, that's a positive way to say it. If we're intentional about taking our time, evaluating players, finding the right fit, seeing Johan Demay's team maybe go out without Klauss in some preseason matches, and then evaluating what the true need is, working with, if we slow roll it, well, we now know that the transfer window goes from January 26th to March 26th. It is a month shorter this year than it ever has been in the winter window because there's an expanded summer window that we'll talk about later. But because of that, there's less time to actually find players to fill this position. The necessity to replace Klauss is magnified by remembering what happened when we didn't replace players that we sold who were key contributors in the previous seasons. History is trying to teach us a lesson. And so this move here has me very concerned, and it has me concerned because the man at the top is still the same person at the top during both of those instances. Diego's been with the club since the summer of 2023. He's overseen it all. Now, he wasn't, as far as we know, the person pulling the strings on the sporting department, but we also know that there were some dynamics at play there that continue to be at play. This to me, Stu, is potentially Corey Ray's first real flashpoint moment for St. Louis City. If you're selling Klauss, a fan favorite, who's on an expiring contract for $2 million, you can sell it really well. You can thank Klauss for his service to the club. You can talk about what he meant. You can sell this as an objective, good move and a smart and a shrewd move in helping the club turn over as our front office and our sporting leadership has turned over itself. But at the same time, you cannot do this, not replace him, and ask the fans to trust that you'll bring in somebody in the summer to improve the club. Because by then, like we've seen in the past 2 seasons, the season could be gone. So, I mean, am I over worrying about this, or is there, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, to add to your Indiana Vassilev, not a 1-to-1 replacement, but we were significantly tied to, or rumors were very strongly suggesting that we were after Aaron Opoku, left winger last winter window. Sort of, not a direct replacement for Indy, of course, but he would slot in, and that was another situation where we weren't willing to pay the fee to bring him over in that window. And like you said, it was too late by the time we brought in Jean da Silva, and he wasn't worth his salt anyway. So, I mean, to add to your Indiana Vassilev, not a 1-to-1 replacement, but we were significantly tied to, or rumors were very strongly suggesting that we were after Aaron Opoku, left winger last winter window. Sort of, not a direct replacement for Indy, of course, but he would slot in, and that was another situation where we weren't willing to pay the fee to bring him over in that window. And like you said, it was too late by the time we brought in Jean da Silva, and he wasn't worth his salt anyway. So what a waste there. No,
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, I think we're setting up for the shortened season in 2027 and the change in the calendar, MLS calendar for that year. But it does seem uh, disappointing to throw in the towel, as it were, and maybe that's unfair to Corey Ray. He's still fairly new on the job, and his experience should mean he can operate under the MLS rule structure a little bit better than Lutz could. I
Yeah.
think we definitely saw evidence that Lutz just didn't get it, and Ray hopefully will. And I think a good sign that Ray does is A, if he uses this cash for the game money, and B, if he can extract more out of Toronto for Sergeant's rights, which is basically free Garber bucks.
It really is. Yeah. There's a couple questions about, do we have any idea about Klauss replacements? No, we really don't. And that kind of is one of the worries, is for better or for worse, City still is pretty tight-lipped as far as the leaks on players that they're interested in and who they're targeting. And we as fans, potentially even the front office and Yoann Damet, need to see this current roster exist under Yoann Damet in the system that they're giving him the keys to before they really see where the deficiencies are. And that in and of itself is the worry, where if you're not proactive enough to say, all right, regardless of the contract situation, the value we're getting from him, maybe Klauss wasn't seen as a fit in the system that Corey Ray wants to have, building his roster around. Maybe he's not a fit in the system Yoann Damet is going to be implementing. They've had a whole week to evaluate Klauss with Yoann Damet. Maybe they don't think he's a fit. The problem with that is they should have somebody lined up, player profiles that would be good fits so that they can fill this slot in the winter. It doesn't have to be a DP to me. I'm not asking for a like-for-like replacement. I'm not asking or an overall replacement beyond what Klauss was, because Klauss would have been a TAM player for St. Louis. I'm not asking even for a TAM level player necessarily. But I talked earlier this offseason that I want to see a proven goal scorer, whether it was at the time, thinking on the wings or a wide midfielder. I want to see a proven goal scorer signed, money splashed for that. Without Klauss, that becomes that much more paramount. You can't take chances on up-and-coming talent. You can't sign a U22 as a striker because they performed well at the youth level in South America or in Europe or in Africa and say he's ready to take the next step. That's unprovenness, right? You can do that for a Fallu Fall at center back, where he's shown everything at certain levels and he's taking the next step in his career. He's got all the profile. Center back, you can do that. Striker, replacing Klauss, the only double-digit goal scorer that we've had on our roster, you can't do that, right? That the need for provenness is magnified, and the need for provenness now is magnified. So as far as specific players, we don't have any ideas. Sorry. I wish I did. Trust me. As far as player profiles, I tend to want to think somebody that isn't Klauss. You're not looking for a hold-up striker. Maybe you're looking for a box hawk. Maybe you're looking for somebody who is living in and around the goal and can make moves in tight spaces, and you have a possession-based offense, and you're kind of feeding that player, whether it's in tight runs or whether it's in set pieces or crosses. That player might, in a player profile perspective, that player might be Simon Betcher. You're looking for a lot of work in zone 14 into zone 17. You're looking for maybe a Simon Betcher, right? In and around goal. That's where my mind kind of takes me to as we talk of, if it's a player profile issue, in addition to the contract, the issues potentially with the front office, maybe you're looking for something different. And we know Betcher is a different forward than Klauss, right? And would you be comfortable with the team going with a forward core? Because now, I mean, if we talk about the roster, pivot a little bit in this Klauss conversation, talk about the current roster on the team. If for some reason we don't replace him with some quality, where do you actually see the body? Like, who do you think the body is that's replacing him, much less the talent? Is it a Simon Betcher? Is it a Cedric Teuchert if he gets healthy enough? Because he did play the 9 for Hanover in Germany. He was a forward before we acquired him. He's still listed as a forward by the club. In fact, we also have Brendan McSorley, Caden Glover, Songbin Yang, he's a winger by trade, but there are players who can play forward on this roster. Who do you think rises above them if we are not able to sign a replacement or choose not to sign a replacement for Klauss in this window?
I mean, I don't think Simon Betcher is the one to lead the line this year, and maybe that's unfair to say to him. But I am a Betcher fan from his days at SLU, so I love that guy. But last year was unconvincing that he can step into the vacuum that's being created here. Yeah, Cedric Teuchert would make some sense, but he's also struggled with being fit, and he might be potentially leaving in June as well. So
yeah, true.
What's the long-term plan? Do you play Teuchert till June and he has a good first half of the season? You extend him, take on his option. That to me, given his injury history, carries a level of risk, but maybe he's worth it. I don't know. I mean, there's just such a gap here, and if we are guaranteeing that we're signing a replacement this summer for Klauss, spending that, $6 million or whatever we spend, if we do, I mean, we're absolutely locking ourselves into a 3 DP model for a while, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. We are, and that is a concern as well for a team that has signed Roman Berkey to a designated player contract, your goalkeeper, for at least the 26th season. And a reminder, we don't know if Berkey is not able to be bought down for the length of his contract or just for 26. We've heard that he's not able to be bought down as a DP in 2026, so he is a locked and loaded DP along with Marcel Hartl. We will find out in April or May during the MLSPA salary guide release what Berkey's actual salary is and whether it will be above the escalating threshold that exists in the salary cap in 2027. So we'll know about that then. But for 26, that's why I'm not expecting I'm not expecting a DP to be signed in this window, Klauss leaving or not. I'm still not. I don't think that Ray would. I use the word hamstring, but I don't think he would go all in right now on a DP for this season, unless by some, grace of God type thing that he found the absolute perfect fit that he could sign for a long-term contract like he did with Wallem and Edelman, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there's a comment in the chat too. Have we ever had a proven goal scorer from BW8786? I think that's hard to fairly say. I don't think it's hard to fairly say. The answer is no. We have not acquired yet a proven goal scorer for a consistent period of time. That was my point a few weeks ago in what I want to have happen in this next season is I want to have some forward signed that is a proven goal scorer. That whether it's in the winter or the summer, I don't need that kind of player to be signed in the winter necessarily. I need that player to exist on St. Louis. I need us to take the next leap, the next evolution in our spending and acquire a proven goal scorer. Miami was reportedly in the $13 million range wanting to get Denny Bouanga. We don't need to go that extreme, but we need to be looking both internally at intra-league transfers and loans. Cashfers, the loan system has changed that we'll talk about in a minute. It's more expansive. Ray has a lot of tools at his disposal. He has prided himself. He's talked to us about how he has connections implicitly in the league because of his time with Toronto, Montreal, and Columbus. So he knows people in the league. The league is expanding a lot of their mechanisms for intra-league loans, for the amount of cashers that you can do. Utilize those. Find talent inside the league, if nothing else. Maybe St. Louis becomes one of those teams that we're not necessarily looking abroad to bring on players. The German connection is severed essentially at this point, at least the way it was. So maybe we're going to be a team that looks more internally into who we can acquire. The deal with sending Klauss to LA, that's an internal league move. That's Ray having his connections. We could be seeing more of those, and it wouldn't surprise me if we start rounding out our roster a little bit more with some of those moves as well, based on Ray's connections.
And if we're looking internal, don't forget that Klauss leaving opens up an international slot that we could also, flip for more GAM if we're gonna bring in more of that. But speaking of Dennis Bouanga, to do a slight quick segue, with some of the drama going on because LAFC shut down his potential move to Inter Miami.
Right.
Today, he retweeted a tweet from someone else that said, "You're inches from your dream and the club shuts it down." If you're an LAFC fan, that's not what you want to see.
No, not at all. Not
That's
at
brutal.
all. Yeah, and I think when it comes to rounding out the roster, filling out some of these positions, it's probably we've probably talked at length about Klauss at this point. I will say that on Flavor, this is one of those difficult things to kind of do because it's not official, and so there will be a lot of official deep diving and looking at how what the reality is once this happens. So whether it's Friday of this week, whether it's next week, we might do a special episode. I might come live on Instagram or YouTube or something. Maybe it's not a pod, but it's just a quick hit. We'll cover it, and it'll be different than what this is. This has a fairly hefty amount of speculation, and I will be looking to comments that Ray and Diego. Let me rephrase. I will be looking at comments that that Ray makes. Diego seems like he's taken a step back in some of these public sporting face comments. And so it would surprise me to hear comments from Diego in this context. I will be looking for comments from Corey Ray on not just what Klauss meant to the club, but what he looks to do going forward. Reinvesting the $2 million or so into GAM, how he looks, how quickly he looks to replace him. Maybe player profile related would help the fan base. Ultimately, I think St. Louis has... It's not just a player productivity issue. It's not just a quality in the roster issue. It is a communications issue between the club and the fan base. And there's a lot of trust that the club is asking the fans to have in this move and this shift to Corey Ray and Yohan DeMay. And there's not probably a lot that they can or are able to share with all the mechanisms moving in the background. But I think fans need to know somewhat of the plan. There needs to be a little more transparency about the plan that fans are being asked to support, because ticket prices are not going down as this work is happening. Klauss gets sold for $2 million. We don't replace him in this window. We start the season with a striker core of Simon Betcher, Brendan McSorley, Caden Glover, and a barely healthy Cedric Toyshirt. Ticket prices aren't going down because our striker core is subpar from what it was in an abysmal 2025 season. So there needs to be an olive branch extended to the fans regarding some of these sporting moves. God love Matt Seebeck. Fans love the experience, right? We love our jersey talk. We love our stadium experience. None of it means anything without a winning product on the field. We've said it before. Soccer, it's more than soccer. Soccer has to be your core. It's not more than soccer unless you have soccer. So I think there's a lot that the club needs to be doing from that perspective to help bring the fans along on this journey. And that's what a lot of folks are looking for, because otherwise you see reports like this, and when it happens, you're not going to have a like-for-like replacement in the moment. It's not, we traded Klauss for $2 million, we made a corresponding move. That almost never happens. So you're going to have to bring the fans along on this journey, help them understand what the actual vision is. Don't keep it to yourself, right? Fans, we've missed the playoffs 2 years in a row, and there's comments in the chat. You have to act, and we talked about it before. You have to actively work to miss the playoffs. Things have to go tragically wrong multiple seasons in a row. You have to be really bad at what you're doing to miss the playoffs in MLS, especially 2 years in a row. 60+% of the teams make the playoffs. You could fall into the playoffs just by getting lucky enough. And St. Louis has missed it for 2 years. The fans deserve better.
Absolutely. I mean, it's quite a shift in at least fan attitude for the last week. I know we'll get into it in a minute, but with some of the rumored incomings and with Edelman signing that contract extension, there was a big kind of jump shot in the arm to fans. Seeing things like, Edu traveling to Florida, that was another boost. Of course, if that's a hint at him being available more often this season, that's massive. Those are massive things. But, the news today and also the news that came out yesterday on the Klauss departure, I mean, those are huge hits. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, and I'll let you get into it when you get into it. But yeah, those are kind of kicks.
Well, let's wrap up the Klauss talk. We've spent almost an hour talking about Klauss, which I wanted to. I didn't want to slow roll this. I didn't want to not give it the time and attention, because I meant to do it. I didn't do it. Klauss is special in my household. He's my oldest daughter's favorite player. She's had his jersey. Her favorite number became 9 because of Klauss. That never existed as a thought, as far as I know, until she watched him play in those first 5 games in St. Louis back in 2023. He scored, I think, 5 goals in 5 games. He was a machine, and he sunk himself into the hearts of everyone. And so that's why this hits so hard for us, for me, for a lot of City fans. And Klauss is one of the OGs. So he deserves this kind of conversation when it comes to his importance to St. Louis. But at the end of the day, you're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. I don't know if this next part's going to be on the radio because we went long on Klauss. Maybe that's all you get from us on the Big 550 KTRS. But on the pod, we've got a lot more, right? This has been a tumultuous week. Stu mentioned it. The folks in our chat are talking about it. It's been an up and down week, and it started on the highest of highs, at least contextually, right? Last weekend was a big weekend for St. Louis on a positive note. A lot of incomings, a lot of excitement. It started last weekend with the Daniel Edelman news that Daniel Edelman had signed. City announced that they'd signed him to a contract extension through June 2029 with an option for the 29-30 season. Edelman becomes the first City player signed pursuant to the new calendar shift that MLS will be having in July of 2027 as a shift from a essentially fall to spring calendar season. Edelman now signed through June 2029 with an option for the 29-30 season. Edelman is on the senior roster now. No special designations. Confirmed that with the club. His salary in 2025 was about $465,000. So expect that to be similar, maybe a little higher. Maybe you got a raise. Maybe it's up to 600. But Edelman being only 22 years old, turning 23 this season, lot of excitement around him. We've talked before and on social media about all the qualities he brings on the field. Hopefully everybody's kind of familiar with his game at this point. But we are expecting him to be the presumptive number 6, the central defensive midfielder, at the bare minimum, competing with Chris Dirk. And there's a lot of talk about possibly playing alongside him. But Stu, when we heard this announcement last weekend, Edelman was already under contract through 27, I think with an option for 28. But now City investing, making it quick. They didn't put out a press release, to my knowledge. They did more just a social media announcement. He's wearing the number 24 officially. What did you make of this contract extension of Edelman?
Well, Edelman wears 24, then that's a guarantee that Sargent's not coming here because that's Sargent's number at Norwich.
There you go.
Mark that down. I think it still is, at least. No, I mean, it's I know he's a guy. If you follow youth national team circles, he's kind of popped up as someone who's been exciting over the years. He's been attached to some various international rumors over time. So I don't know until I see him. I know he was tied for first on the beep test. That was exciting with Durkin. So a competition's good. And to be honest, Edelman raises the floor over, Fredo Morales last year, Alfredo Morales. So in the end, I mean, I'm somewhat excited about him, but I mean, he's not the super, super exciting signing that I'm hoping to see next.
No, and I think Edelman shored up a position, right? So we had questions about Chris Durkin's ability to play the 6. We wanted a 6 to be signed. We paid a decent amount for Edelman, $500,000 in 2026 GAM, 227, and then escalators up to potentially a total of 850,000 max. But I'm excited from just really quick recapping some of Edelman. Played at New York Red Bull, now Red Bull New York, for his entire career. He's 22. He's played in MLS for 4 seasons, over 8,000 minutes. Perennial number 6 central defensive midfielder, never really asked to play on the ball, so he's excited to do that, and he's looking for that next move to Europe. He's modeling his game off Tyler Adams, essentially, so that's the kind of player we're getting. He's a ball hawk, he's a destroyer, he's a 6 out and out, and he's looking forward, excited to improve his game with more on the ball work. That is a valued position that we need on this team. And complementing that was the news that broke and that we reported as rumor last week, that broke earlier this week. Conrad Wallem officially returning to St. Louis. Conrad Wallem, everybody should be familiar with him. He was on loan from Slavia Prague last season. He signed a new contract through June 2029. No loan that we know of, but he's the second player and the second of two signed under Corey Ray, along with Daniel Edelman, to have his contract through June 2029. Big deal that these two players, to me, are what Corey Ray is building his foundation on through that long of a period of time. So we all know the value that Conrad Wallem brought last season. I've got some stats on the video, but he had 32 matches played, which was third on the team. He had over 2,700 minutes played, which was second on the team. He was only one of three players to play 2,000 minutes total. He had 1 goal and 4 assists. He was 6th in the goals added stat on the team, which looks at every on-the-ball action, interrupting, shooting, passing, receiving, fouling. Of minimum players with 1,500 minutes on the team last season, he was 6th. He's also not a designated player. He will likely be a TAM player. Last year, his contract was around $500,000, if I recall correctly. This year, if it's similar, you have a transfer fee that was reported to be in the 2 million euro range, which is about $2.3 million, if I have my conversion calculator correct from the other day. That, over the course of his contract through 2029, would make him a TAM level player. Pretty squarely TAM level, not even like he's getting close to DP status. So this is exactly what we talked about last season into the offseason of what we wanted of Conrad Wallem. We wanted him to come back, but we didn't want him to occupy a DP slot. We wanted to be able to bring him back as a TAM level player, and it wasn't possible with the loan to purchase option and the negotiations that happened with Diego Gigliani, Corey Ray, and Slavia Prague worked out. Prague made a small profit on Wallem's original transfer fee. So I think everybody was happy with this. Wallem hasn't competed for Prague this season since returning for them. He hasn't played in Europe at all. So this is fantastic for St. Louis, and it works out well for both parties. Not being a designated player, he does take up an international slot, and the extreme versatility of Conrad Wallem just cannot be understated. He played left wing back, right back, central mid, attacking mid, wide attacking mid. I think the only position he might not have played is maybe center back, a strict forward, and goalkeeper. Other than that, he was all over the field. And what we hope to see from this season is him plug more deliberately into maybe a left back or left wing back, or even right back if something were to change. But Yoann Demay had discussed with Conrad Wallem, talked about how he wants to get him more. He wants to see positional flexibility like he had in 2025, but while he likes the ability for him to maneuver all over the field and how to take spaces, play in those with comfortability, he wants to see Conrad Wallem kind of own a position. And that's what we look for Wallem, is having more knowledge of where his home is going to be and where he can really dive into. The flexibility as far as Wallem goes is the flexibility that City is going to have. You could watch the Columbus game from last season, where Columbus had right backs, they had center backs that would just take space, and they moved into different parts of the field. Suddenly they're occupying a left wing spot, or left wing when they were a right back, and they have to know how to play that position for a period of time. That's the flexibility positionally that I think Demay is talking about with Wallem and others. But at the end of the day, I do think Wallem's going to find himself a home at a specific position, and I do think that's left back or left wing back. Are you as bullish on this signing as I am, Stu?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at Wallem. I mean, would you say he was our second, potentially third best outfield player last year? I mean, Hartl, potentially Klauss, and Wallem.
Yeah, last year, absolutely. And when I was thinking about how to build a roster, like the non-negotiables for me, I think I had from last season's roster, I had Berkey, Falou Fall, Conrad Wallem, Edu Leuven, Marcel Hartl, and I had Klauss. So I had those 6 guys that were my non-negotiables. Pretty good spine, and then Conrad Wallem there. You could argue guys like Thomas Totland for periods of time. You could argue Timo Baumgartel, but to me, it was those 6 guys, and Wallem was at or better than top 3 of those guys last season for the entire year, not just ups and downs, but he was Mr. Consistency.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, and this is probably a space that if he was involved in this, and it seems like he was, some plaudits should be given to Diego if he was played a hand in this. So give credit where it's due. No, I mean, totally thrilled, and I love to hear that Wallem is hopefully going to be more committed to one spot. I mean, flexibility is absolutely fantastic, but you want guys to get comfortable in a role. Also, the rest of the team to be comfortable. I mean, it's kind of a nightmare scenario maybe if Wallem's playing left wing back one match and then he gets, due to an injury, God forbid, he's playing center mid next, and then you slide in Hebert to your left wing back position. It absolutely disrupts the whole way that the team is playing. I mean, Wallem also has a really sick tattoo now on his back that
He
we saw
does.
from a tattoo artist in Hamburg. So yeah, no, this is positive. It's unfortunate that the great news from this is kind of overshadowed by the Klauss departure.
It really is. And I the way my notes were on this show, I had Wallem at the very top. I wanted to open the show with Conrad Wallem. I wanted to open the show with Daniel Edelman. I wanted to open the show with Mbake Fall. I pride myself on not just a delivering all of the information, but making it kind of timeline appropriate, where you listen to us and you're like, okay, this happened first, and then all these other things happen. You kind of get a sense of how the week has developed, but there's just no way around Klauss being the biggest impact. And that's it's unfortunate for the Conrad Wallem discussion, because it should be a massive positive for St. Louis, whether you think of him as a new player or not. We'll look at our incomings and outgoings here in a second, but he was a player that even if you don't consider him a net new incoming, even though he signed a brand new contract, he was a player you had to bring back from last year. You look at the players like Kessler, Padelford, Wallem. I had Wallem at the top of my list. I love Kess. Padelford was great, but what Wallem brought to us and what I think Yoann Damet is going to want from his players, I just don't think we have players that can replicate that in positions of need, like Conrad Wallem. Like we have Fleu Fall, we have Timo Baumgartel. Yeah, they're center backs that are good. We're going to talk about Mbake Fall in a second, but we didn't have anybody. We had no left back on the roster. So this filled a hole that was left when Conrad Wallem's loan expired, at the very least. It is a massive thing. The graphic I showed on the stream had Conrad Wallem listed as 6'1", and Drew Young, friend of the pod, called me out on that. That is the height that he was listed as in the City press release. I almost put, I think, 5'10" based on A, standing next to him on how tall I am, but also B, I think others had him listed sub-6 for sure. City listed him as 6'1". So maybe he was wearing some pretty sweet kicks on the day of that measurement. Maybe City's being a little gracious on that, but it is what it is. Now, Stu, this fills the left back spot, right? This is where we want to see him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we're playing left wing back, then I assume his backup depth there is going to be Joyner.
Yeah.
But with the news of potential injuries happening today, that does that potentially change the how we set up? I mean, are we going to potentially 4 at the back or 5 at the back, and where does Wallem fit in a 4 at the back?
Well, I know your time with us, Stu, is short on this show, so I want to get to two more things. I want to get to the other report that happened last weekend, another positive, and I alluded to it just moments ago, that Mamadou Mbake Fall is rumored to be on his way to St. Louis. A 6'2" right-footed center back reportedly on his way to St. Louis could be the answer to a 3 center back. Right center back, if Yoann Damet runs that formation with a healthy Fleu Fall, obviously. More on that in a moment. At least significant center back depth. Now, Mbake, who we're calling him Mbake because he wears that on the back of his jersey, he played for LAFC for a couple years. If you want to see some stats on that, STL Soccer News on X, and that's the place to go. Our friend Chris Gebhardt has a ton of videos on Mbake that he posted, and they're really great from his time at LAFC, allowing you to see some of the benefits that Mbake has on the ball, with his vision, his strength, and his ability to take advantage of what other players give him as far as space goes. Now, Mbake also went to Villarreal and Barcelona, which, definitely catches the headlines, but he's only featured for Barca's B team. That's key to keep in mind, to keep impressions in check on this one. Stu, what do you make of this Mbake rumor?
I mean, it's certainly exciting. Some of the feedback seen online from LAFC fans about him is that he's absolutely lethal on set pieces. Mm-hmm. He's great with the ball at his feet, and he is absolutely going to get torched in space by attackers. So, I mean, those all sound exciting. Like, it'll at least add some interest to the season. But especially if we end up with, say, a double pivot of, I don't know, Chris Durkin and Daniel Edelman, then it'll be nice to have another, ball playing center back who can progress the ball upfield.
Very true. And that can help with that kind of coverage. So if we end up somehow with three in the midfield, with Leuven pressing a little higher up, maybe Durkin and Edelman deeper in front of our center backs, guys like Falou Fall and Mbake Fall, the Fall brothers, the whatever, the I don't know, the Fall guys. We need to come up with a nickname if that ends up being our center back duo, but they can help with that, right? That's why you have strength in ball playing center backs. And that does seem to be something that Yoann Damet is going to take advantage of. Corey Ray very mindful of adding that quality to our back line. Stu, before you go, the last thing that I want to really get into is I want to get into the injury updates from camp today. I want to get your thoughts on that. I can take it from here after that. Breaking news, if you hadn't heard, on Thursday, Yoann Damet was available to the media, and he relayed reports that Falou Fall and Tomas Ostrak have been shut down for preseason. They both have sustained leg injuries. That's as far as we had on the news. Both of them are being shut down to have time to recover. Tomas Ostrak missed last week, the first week of training in St. Louis, and he hasn't returned this week, and so they're shutting him down. Falou Fall appears to have suffered some kind of new injury. He was training in St. Louis fully with the group. I saw him with my own two eyes on multiple days. He was fine, and now he's shut down for the preseason. Yoann Damet had said that the likelihood of players who don't see time like this in preseason to be ready to go for the start of the season is not good. So he's not expected to be neither of these players, Falou Fall or Tomas Ostrak, are expected to be ready to go for the start of the season. I asked Yoann Damet if he expects to have anybody brought in to help cover for these players or to fill a need while they were recovering. And he didn't really indicate that they were at that time, but he did talk about the other center backs, the other players that they had. There is Lucas McNaughton, the trialist and I feel like Lucas McNaughton is somehow a black hole in my mind. He's a trialist from DC United, right, Stu? And he was from Nashville. Yeah, Nashville, Toronto. Lucas McNaughton suffered a devastating thigh injury a couple of years ago. He's a trialist in camp. He has a ton of center back MLS experience. If he can stay healthy, he's a name to watch out for as we watch these preseason reports over the next couple of weeks, a couple of games. But also, there's a collegiate trialist that has joined the team this week. Didn't get a name on that one, but there is a new collegiate trialist center back in camp with St. Louis down in Florida. And then you still have Timo Baumgartel, Kyle Hebert, Josh Arrow, Haziel Orozco, and presumably, if and when he arrives, Mbake Fall. Real quick, Stu, before I get your take on these injuries and what they mean, one thing to keep in mind, Conrad Wallem is not with the club as of yet. He has not received his visa paperwork. All of that's still in process. Yoann Damet even said he has an assistant coach that hasn't arrived yet because of paperwork issues. So we're waiting on this visa thing that we joked about before is a significant hindrance. We don't know when Conrad Wallem is going to be arriving with the team, even though he's officially signed. Yoann Damet is an assistant. If Mbake Fall is signed, we have no idea how long it's going to take for that paperwork to allow him to arrive in St. Louis to learn the system, be ready to go, to jump in. So I think the assumption that Mbake Fall would be able to take over Falou Fall's spot to start the season, that may be wishful thinking. So realistically, Stu, what does this mean for potentially the start of the season?
Well, we don't know how McNaughton will go. You might have said him and I missed him, but also Zach Lillington figures into it.
Thank you.
The first round pick from St. Louis City, who is a kind of Swiss Army knife player who seems, I mean, there hasn't been anything official about him signing to the senior roster, but it wouldn't surprise me if he does. I mean, if we play three at the back, if Falou Fall isn't available for the first three matches of the season, and we're going up against Charlotte, LAFC, and San Diego. It's Charlotte, Charlotte, San Diego FC and Sounders are our first three, and then LAFC. So it's a very difficult first four matches. So if we, if we're starting a back three of Josh Yarrow,
Oh,
Timo Baumgartel, and Kyle Hebert. That doesn't exactly
stop.
fill me with a whole
Stu.
lot of excitement.
Stu,
But we
no.
also fall might be healthy, and we have Timo Fall, which is much better. Or Hebert is much maligned, and maybe he's a respectable replacement level player. So
Yeah.
I give him credit where he's due there. So no, it's not ideal if your best center back is out for the first three matches of the season against three of the best teams in the league.
No, that's true. And that might impact somebody who makes the roster. So we might add an extra center back like a Lillington or a McNaughton onto the supplemental roster because of that. But we are just as likely and preparing the fandom to start with Kyle Hebert and or Josh Arrow as a starting center back on opening day 2026. And if that scares the bejesus out of you, you're not alone. We know what Kyle Hebert and Josh Arrow are. Defensively, you can argue that Kyle Hebert is a strong center back option. It's the ball playing center back aspect, the asking them to direct the ball forward to a midfielder, a fullback, a winger, however it works out, that I think you really struggle with what Kyle Hebert is. And after seeing both of them, Yarrow and Hebert, for 4 years now, and 22 through 25, we know what we're getting with them, right? Nothing's changing in this regard. And that's kind of what scared us is we've seen the mistakes by Yarrow. We've seen the defensive stoutness, but we've seen the pretty consistent individual mistakes in 1 or 2 times per game. And Kyle Hebert just seems anemic and afraid to pass the ball forward, struggling at times with his turns, as our friend Brian Simpson says. But it's the ability to build from the back that may be a core and possess the ball with relying on our center backs as safety valves that Kyle Hebert and Josh Arrow kind of scare you with.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that my time on this show I was able to impart such wonderful and cheery opinions to everyone who's listening to this tomorrow on their ride home from work on their Friday, right before Snowmageddon hits.
Oh.
Yeah, on that note, unfortunately, I'm going to have to step out, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be interesting and exciting to hear you tackle the Henry Kessler conversion to a basketball player news and all of the training camp media availability days. So it's, as always, it's been a pleasure, Matt, and see you next week.
Appreciate you, Stu. Thanks for hopping on. It's been a great show with you. And now that Stu is departing us, we're going to shift to something that's, I would say, is one of my bread and butters. Let's talk roster, right? Let's talk where we sit right now. And if you're watching live, I'm going to just dig through this real time. This isn't screenshots. This is me just kind of digging through a few things that I have here. If you're listening live, if you're listening to us, I will talk through what I'm showing. But our roster is incomplete, basically. MLS has released GAM amounts for all teams. We are up to 6.15 million of GAM, which is 5th most in Major League Soccer, and we have about 5 roster spots left to fill. The work that Corey Ray has left to do is predicated on a couple things that we're looking at here. You have 2 designated players, obviously Marcel Hartl, Roman Berkey. You have 3 U22 players, Jake Girdwood Reich, Songbin Jong, and Falou Fall. You have 4 TAM level players currently on the roster based on 2026. You have Eddie Leuven, Klauss, Toyshirt, and Wallem. Klauss could come off, so that could mean 3 TAM players. You have Tomas Ostrak, who actually, based on his salary of the past few years, $801,000, will now be a standard senior player because the maximum salary in MLS, as far as the salary budget charge, is now up to $803,125. Significant increase over the past couple of years. So Ostrak comes off the TAM. Ostrak, Baumgartel, Durkin, Edelman, Totland, Hebert, Betcher, Lunt, Celio Pompeu, and potentially Mbake Fall. If we assume that both rumors are true, you'll have Klauss come off and Fall, Mbake Fall come on. Now, I gave those orders of salary. On the supplemental roster, we have more questions than answers, to be honest. Caden Glover, Mekhi Joyner, Miguel Perez, and Tyson Pierce are all our homegrown players. Haziel Orozco, Brendan McSorley, Josh Arrow, and Christian Oliveras. With the big caveat that we don't really know Ben Lunt and Josh Arrow if they're both on the senior, if it's one or the other, they're both on the supplemental. I think they both could qualify depending on salary situations because both were re-signed to new contracts. So what they made in 2025 might not apply. If it does apply, it could be the fact that we only have one senior roster spot left with Mbake Fall signed, a little less flexibility than we would like. Maybe two if Klauss ends up being sold. And then we have more available on the supplemental. And the availability on the supplemental matters because I think that's where you could slide in some of the guys in camp, some of the trialists. If Palmer Alt makes the team, if Lucas McNaughton makes the team, supplemental. If Zach Lillington or Connor Forcellini makes the roster, our super draft picks, supplemental roster. So I think we are likely to fill our supplemental roster based on some of these guys that are already in camp as opposed to brand new signings. The depth chart is where things start to get a little dicey. So an estimated depth chart without Joao Klauss looks something like a starting 11 potentially. And this is also considering there's no, let's take, for instance, we don't have Mbake Fall signed. We know the injuries to Ostrak and Falufal, and we've sold Klauss. Let's take those 4 base assumptions for a starting 11 for City if we don't sign anybody else. We are looking at Roman Berkey in goal, Conrad Wallem on the left, Kyle Hebert and Timo Baumgartel as our center backs, Thomas Totland on the right, Edu Leuven and Daniel Edelman central mids, an attacking group of probably Celio Pompeu, Marcel Hartl, Songbin Zhang, and Simon Betcher. That's if we run a 4-2-3-1. Right. So we have 3 mids. We have a striker. Other candidates here for starting would be obviously Mekhi Joyner and Cedric Toyshirt, depending on his health. They could push for time in that attacking group. Toyshirt at the 9, probably, the more we think about it. Joyner, obviously, at left mid. Josh Yarrow is always a candidate there, lurking in the darkness of center back, just waiting for an opportunity to get his time with an injury occurs. And more often than not, last season that happened, where Josh Yarrow would appear in the starting 11 if there was an injury. He's steady. We know what he offers defensively. And we assume Edelman would be the starting central mid. Now, if speculation ends up being true and Yoann Demay implements a 3-4-2-1 of sorts, you're looking more like Roman Berkey in goal, Kyle Hebert, Timo Baumgartel, and Josh Yarrow as your center backs. We just don't have any other center backs if this injury occurs. You've got Haziel Orozco, who can play, who is a center back, so he's in the mix, but it's 3 of those 4. Kyle Hebert, Timo Baumgartel, Josh Yarrow, and Haziel Orozco. This is without Mbake Fall being signed. This is with the Falufal injury. Left wing back would be Conrad Wallem, pretty obvious. Central mids, you've got Edu Leuven and Daniel Edelman again. Right wing back, you've got Thomas Totland. And then your attackers, in this case, you only have 3. You have Marcel Hartl, Songbin Zhang, and probably Simon Betcher, or Cedric Toyshirt if he's healthy enough to make a push. But in that case, you've got 3 center backs. You've got 4 midfielders with your 2 wing backs, 2 attacking mids, Hartl and Songbin, and then a striker. The depth and the comparisons to the 2025 and even 2024 St. Louis City teams, with the injuries, especially to Tomas Ostrak and Falufal, it does not look like an improved squad. And that's the biggest frustration I think a lot of City fans have is you look at this with the trialists that are on board. Lucas McNaughton is always there as an option. So if he's signed, I would honestly be comfortable with Lucas McNaughton starting at center back because of the work we've seen him do prior to his injury. And I've said, Ben Wright, a friend from Nashville, 615 Soccer, has said as much, that he is a starting caliber center back. You get him back to that level, it could be an option. And along with Zach Lillington, I think those 2 could really help shore up this center back depth with or without Mbake Fall being signed, but especially with the injury to Falufal. I think one of those 2 have to make the roster if we're expecting Falufal to not be available to start the season. And if we don't sign anybody else except for Mbake Fall. I just don't see the numbers working out any other way other than one of, if not both, of Lucas McNaughton and Zach Lillington making the supplemental roster to start the season. Other areas of concern are just quality, right? With Klauss looking like he's gone, the quality at striker is a big question mark. Yoann Demay talked about Simon Betcher in his media availability on Thursday and referenced him consistently as a chance creator. Talked about getting unlucky last season. Talked about how he's good at creating a ton of chances. Coached against him last season, had positive comments to say, seeing him play when he came from with Columbus. But it's said it's about getting his confidence. Sometimes in the final third, ends up on the other end, unlucky situations, but on the right side, he's able to create a ton of chances, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at from a Simon Betcher perspective. Whether or not Johan is forced to rely on Simon Betcher with injuries to Toyshirt, selling of Klauss, or whether he's the first choice of these options, that's going to have to play out in the preseason, right? Like that's going to be one of those things that we just have to deal with in the course of these next few games, the next few weeks, understanding who plays what position. One of the other things Johan Demay had said during his availability was about preseason matches and getting player profiles in the correct positions. So probably a good time to mention that there is no stream for the fans on Saturday's game. I know that's a frustrating thing to hear, but there's not going to be availability to watch this Red Bull New York game that City plays on Saturday. Snowmageddon hits St. Louis. We don't get a soccer game to watch. It's kind of rough. I am entirely with you. That's kind of the roster as it breaks down, right? Like it's not pretty. There are holes to fill. Going back to the conversation with Klauss, Demay has a ton of work left to do. There is some excitement though in camp, right? I want to look at Edu Leuven and Chris Durkin, some comments that they made about camp that kind of highlight some things that they're working on. So Edu Leuven said the theme for him so far this preseason is that Johan is very structured with clear ideas and knows exactly what he wants in general, also in the small details. And there's a lot for the team to pick up on and learn. Leuven, Durkin, Mackay last week, Edelman last week, they all talked about so much that Johan is trying to implement, instill on the players. Seems like there's a lot of back to basics kind of thing, because last week it was the small-sided stuff. It was the tight spaces. It was on the ball work, getting as many touches as possible. This week, Edu was talking mostly about working on the defensive aspect, how to play offensively off the ball, pressing, triggers, how to push opponents where they want them to go with focus on body positioning. And Edu said the team's responding well. Durkin had a lot of the same comments about what the focus on is this week. So if you're able to go down to Bradenton, Florida, or watch this Red Bull New York game, I'd be interested in what you see, but know that the things that the club has been working on are small-sided, on-the-ball work, trying to get better with your footwork, control of the ball, and defensive work. Haven't been a lot of plays strung together. The scrimmage that they had on Saturday, we found out, was shortened to box because of the weather, the cold, the snow. So they got the winter ball out, Leuven and Durkin said. So they haven't even stretched the field fully. Johan Demay did reiterate that the match against Red Bull New York is expected to still have 2 groups of 45 minutes each. So stretching out the minutes for players, stretching out the fitness, but also looking at seeing what kind of flexibility they can have in different formations. Maybe still didn't commit to a formation, so we don't have that knowledge yet. Hoping to hear more about that next week, about how the team actually performed in what they looked like and what they were asked to do against Red Bull New York. But that's going to have to wait till next week. And other things that Leuven and Durkin talked about in their availability this week are what their roles would be. Edu said it's hard to say right now what his specific role will be and how to improve his game under Demay as part of either a double pivot, higher up on the pitch, dangerous in front of goal, or otherwise. Leuven said it's too early to tell right now, as there's a lot of things to take in and learn that will make him a better player, which goes to the back to basics, the fundamentals of everything that Leuven is with everybody else, not just the leader on the team, but everybody else is taking in and trying to understand. Durkin spoke about positional flexibility in conversations with Demay about wanting him, like Wallem, to have more continuity in his position. Because I asked Chris Durkin if he's had conversations with Johan Demay about playing center back, about possibly flexing into that area of need if need be. And Durkin talked about this continuity in positioning while having flexibility and being comfortable where you are. So there's multiple players, I think, that are now hearing this of, we want you to have a home. You need to be a particular player, not a versatile player in the sense of if we've got an injury, we plug and play you all over the field. You need to be comfortable owning this position. And I think that's going to benefit Chris Durkin going into this season, his option year, where he's being pushed by a guy like Daniel Edelman. And Durkin even said, reiterating from what Edelman had said last week, that Yohan DeMay wants on-the-ball players at both midfield and center back. And referencing Daniel Edelman, Durkin specifically mentioned a couple times, yeah, they're competing against each other, but really hoping to play alongside each other as well. So the talk in preseason, which you can't always believe the talk, but you wonder just how much Yohan DeMay might be willing to entertain a 3 midfield group of Edelman, Durkin, and Leuven higher up on the field, with Marcel Hartl obviously still in the attack, and how that might change with the lack of having Klauss on the team. Do you, not that you abandon a striker necessarily, but are you maybe use this as an opportunity to strengthen your midfield as opposed to have that kind of goal scoring threat right in front of goal? Maybe you allow Leuven and Hartl to push a little higher up on the field with somebody like Songbin or Betcher up in front of them, and have Edelman and Durkin as your deeper midfielders. There's a lot more questions than there are answers, at least right now, when it comes to what we can expect from Leuven and Durkin. Yohan DeMay, in his comments on Thursday, not only told us Klauss is in camp, no other comments on Klauss, told us about the injuries to Fall and Ostrak, but he did have good news. And I feel this is burying the lead a little bit too, not just the Wallem, Edelman, Mbake Fall rumors. The good news is Cedric Teuchert, Kyle Hebert, and Thomas Totland have all returned. They were absent from the St. Louis training. They were dealing with, nagging injuries. Load management is what the official term was, but it was something they came into camp with, and they weren't fully 100%. And they're humans, right? Not everybody comes into camp in the exact same shape. They reported they had a little time to strengthen their bodies. They're all now being integrated back into the team. And for Cedric Teuchert in particular, this is huge, because Seti told us at the end of last season that he wasn't expecting to be 100% fully healthy coming into the season. He was just going to try to be back as quick as possible. And now with the news of Klauss, we need Seti back. His contract's up in June. He's fighting for his option to be picked up or fighting for his next destination. Either way, you have to believe that Cedric Teuchert knows what's at stake for the next stage of his career, whether it's here or elsewhere. Also, probably important to remember, Cedric Teuchert went through the process of getting his green card. He likes St. Louis. He did this early, and he wants this to, he likes this to be his home. He's having fun here. He has friends here. If I were to take a guess, Cedric Teuchert is going to be fighting to have St. Louis pick up his option just as much as he is fighting to continue for the next payday type of a thing. And with his contract up in June, he has to play for that to happen. Great to see him back on the field. Hope to see him integrated quickly into the team. Probably wouldn't expect to hear about him playing against Red Bull New York. Possibly the same with Kyle Hebert, Thomas Totland, who missed last week, still integrating into team activities. I mentioned Conrad Wallem's not with the team. Yohan mentioned that to us. Yohan DeMay talked about introducing defensive principles to the team. What he wants to do this weekend, in addition to the 2 groups of 45 minutes, is having a full review of the rosters. Build structure in the attack, focus on small behaviors. Probably good that we don't have access to watch this stream, because it's going to be, I would say, an alpha version of Yohan DeMay's implementation of the St. Louis City system. Very first rough look. Some players are going to be playing out of position by necessity, I think. Groupings are going to be a little wonky because it's not going to be an A team and a B team. It's going to be mixing and matching based on player profiles, DeMay said. And I just hope we have some kind of information after the fact. Looking forward to talking with DeMay on recapping that afterwards. That should cover it from the media availability. 2 more quick things that I want to get to as we wind down on this. And to do that, I'm going to let you, if you're watching this on stream, I'm going to let you look at this fun graphic that I don't really want to talk about. It is our incomings and outgoings that has incomings of Conrad Wallem and Daniel Edelman. See, I'm talking about it. Outgoings for this offseason were Rasmus Alm, Alfredo Morales, Akil Watts, Michael Wenzel, Selmer Pedro, Seth Antwi, Jay Reed, Joey Zielinski, Devin Padelford, Henry Kessler, Christian Oliveras, and now Klauss. So the turnover continues. This is our transfer tracker update for St. Louis City. Pulling it back a little bit, big picture on some MLS logistics. If you had the opportunity to see the article I posted on MLSsoccer.com, they updated a bunch of their roster rules. And this is where I get a little bit nerdy as we end the ramp down towards the end of the episode. But I promise some of these might impact St. Louis. And so it's kind of important to get at least a little bit of knowledge, even if you don't retain it all. The couple most important things are, which I touched on earlier, the transfer window in Major League Soccer was announced January 26th through March 26th. This means that players can have their international transfer certificate requested by MLS teams, and the player is eligible to play in Major League Soccer. Now, obviously, the MLS season doesn't start till February 21st, and so they don't need to have it to be eligible to play until that time. That's why the MLS transfer window is so late compared to Europe. It's not a January 1st to January 31st. It's January 22nd to March 22nd. Now, per FIFA rules, as MLS said, the FIFA has registrations cannot exceed a total of 16 weeks as far as transfer windows go between the winter and the summer. So cumulatively, across the winter and the summer transfer windows, you can only have a maximum of 16 weeks. This is why there's only 8 weeks or so in the winter transfer window. MLS extended the summer transfer window now from July 13th to September 2nd, aligning more closely with Europe. So the summer transfer window is extended, goes now till September. And it sounds late. Yeah, it sounds a lot later than it usually is. But honestly, looking at the schedule, I think I counted 12 St. Louis City games after September 2nd. So even if we sign a player at the close, get them in pretty quick after that, they're going to have the same amount or more of matches available to us than they did in the previous couple of seasons. So the FIFA World Cup pause that has pushed the schedule forward and back kind of lends itself to this. And this is you could think of this year, 2026, as a transition year. You've got this weird little break for the World Cup that acts as a mini off season of sorts, or a mini pause. And then next season we're transitioning. So this season is very much, to me, like a true transitional year, even though 27 will feel like that a little bit more. Roster compliance date for all you nerds out there is February 20th, one day before kickoff. That's when we're going to have the latest info on roster. Some movement might happen right then, so teams be roster compliant, which means all the GAM, all the TAM, all the DPs, the U22s have to be in order, right? The amount of GAM that you have has to be pursuant to how much you're applying to your team. You can't have too many DPs. You can't have the Inter Miami math that occurred 5 years ago or so with Chris Henderson, where they got their hands slapped and fined because they were cooking the books. February 20th, right before. We'll have more information on that when it comes, and we'll be honestly following St. Louis to make sure that they're good to go, which all signs point to, yeah, we've got tons of freedom and flexibility right now. Some of the other, I would say, non-flashy things that MLS announced: the elimination of limitations on the number of cash for player trades a club could make each season. Previously, there were 2 incomings and 2 outgoings that a team could have per season as they introduced this mechanism, cash for trades or cashfers, last season. This year, no limits. St. Louis is already in the midst of doing one. We did one last year with Song Bin Jong, bringing him in for $1.6 million in cash. And now we have flexibility to do plenty more. There's an elimination of the age restrictions and limitation on the number of intra-league loans a club can make. And they removed the age restriction, meaning you could previously only loan a player 24 years or younger and a goalkeeper 28 years or younger to another MLS team. No age restriction. And now you can loan as many as you want. I think previously it might have been 2 or something, but there's no limit on loans. So I mentioned these because these are mechanisms that Corey Ray could take advantage of. We could have more cashfers. Now it's a team hasn't made more than 4 yet, so that would be setting a record. But the number of intra-league loans, having a player come on loan for a period of time from another club. Minnesota reportedly wanted to do that with Christian Espinoza last year, or Christian Ramirez last year, didn't work out. But teams do this. High caliber players, short loans. I think Miami, in fact, just loaned a player, Aviles, I think, to CF Montreal just a couple of hours ago as of this recording, with an option to purchase. So loans with these kind of options happen inside of MLS as well. The cashfers and these loans, MLS is having quite the development in their internal transfer market, which has been a long-standing request from a lot of fans, a lot of teams, a lot of GMs and front offices. The movements between players inside the league is a lot more robust. Corey Ray mentioned a lot of his contacts and experience with others in MLS. That's why I think this is important to know that there's more flexibility in doing these, because it might happen for St. Louis. There's also removing the deadline for a player to be considered domestic instead of international if they get their green card. So if you get your green card, let's say a player for St. Louis gets theirs in May, they're not locked into an international spot for that entire window. We can convert them and suddenly we can sell an international slot, because the next rule change is that clubs may agree on an international roster slot traded that will go back to the team that traded it. These are like short-term international slot loans of sort. So there's flexibility related to both of these in how long you need an international slot if you're able to get a green card for a player. I don't think St. Louis is going to be taking advantage of that anytime soon. I was told just last week that St. Louis doesn't have anybody in the process of getting a green card. So that might be something that we see further down the line. And I think that's just about it for the main news on MLS. There's a couple other things, but none really I think are applicable, and they're even more confusing than the ones I just mentioned. The last thing that I kind of want to get to on this episode of Flyover Footy is shifting focus to City 2. City 2 released their schedule. No price increase is the big story of this one. $99 season tickets, 14 home matches, averaging $7 per match on the season ticket. And the overall price remains consistent on a single game match. Still a focus on family-friendly environments, $13 tickets per match. You can't beat that. There's a kids club that City just released on their app, which I was shocked to hear my wife proactively tell me this does seem like a good deal. I didn't put any words in her head. I didn't put any ideas. She came to me with this. So look at that. If you've got kids, it seems like a pretty good deal for getting them experience. I think you get 4 tickets with that. Check that out on the City app. City 2 continues to be leading the league in, as Matt Seebeck says, growing the next generation of City fandom. And I do wholeheartedly agree with that. They do a great work with City 2. The season itself, because City 2 has been on a tear for the past, their existence basically since 22. The season starts February 28th at 4 p.m. at Energizer Park against cross-state rivals SKC2. Perfect way to kick off the season. We have, I believe, 6 of our first 9 matches at home for City 2. The season goes through September 20th. They will not take a break like MLS will for the World Cup. And we expect to see an overhauled City 2. A lot of veterans have moved on. Contracts declined. Contracts ended. A lot of them are going down to play for Sporting Club Jacksonville, the new expansion side in USL Championship, where we're seeing guys like Christian Oliveros on loan. Dita Armstrong is down there. Von Kuzane. They're gathering City 2 players, former City 2 players like they're Infinity Stones or something. It's kind of fun to see, but we'll watch them. We'll watch our current City 2, and we look forward to having them kick off at Energizer Park on Saturday, February 28th. That's it for me on Flyover Footy. I think we passed the hour and a half mark. So if you're, City 2 actually has 4 players. I'm going to dive into the chat real quick, just see what you guys are talking about, because I've, by myself on here, I have not paid attention to the chat. If you're listening to this, I'm going to read this. Don't worry. City 2 has like 4 players, right? Yes. City 2 has not announced their roster. We don't know exactly who's on the roster. Academy graduates, new signings. They start their preseason here shortly in February, basically the month of February. So plenty more to find out about City 2 here coming up. Looks like a lot of comments on the roster. I think we'll call it there on Flyover Footy. Guys, if news breaks on Klauss, this is big enough that I will do some kind of special thing when it happens. If it happens on Friday, we're going to do a live commiseration on here. If you download us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, continue downloading us. Please don't forego this because of Klauss's news. Really appreciate all the support that you give us. Thank you so much for tuning in on the live stream. Really enjoyed watching this chat, hanging out with you guys. If you've never been on a Flyover Footy live stream, it's pretty fun. I enjoy the community that we have here. I'm very, very thankful for it. A lot of other content creators from Red Smoke Rising, from STL Soccer News, all you guys are huge supporters. I really appreciate it. We are heading into the first preseason match for St. Louis City. We're heading into potentially a brand new world without João Klauss. And there's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of anxiety going on in the City fan base. So no matter what happens, at some point we do consider in the back of our minds, no matter the feelings, no matter the knee-jerk reactions, to trust the process of Corey Ray. You can't abandon the process because of a move like this. I'm not, I won't. I've mentioned my feelings, personal and otherwise, about the importance of Klauss on the field and off. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can have multiple feelings. A lot of them happen concurrently. I watched, and I'll end you with this little nugget. And yes, Aaron in the chat, thank you. Don't forget to buy a flyover kit. It's oliveandyork.com. They're $45. $10 will be going to our charity of choice, which I hope to announce next week. But I appreciate the support. Thank you so much. I have a problem touting myself on the self-marketing, but I want to leave you with this anecdote from one of my favorite television shows. Watched it with my kids before, did this live stream. You probably all know it. It's Bluey. If you've seen the Bluey episode, The Sign, one of the big overarching themes in that entire episode is the fact that when things happen to you and they seem good or they seem bad, the response can be, and oftentimes should be, we'll see. Because at first it seems like losing Klauss, awful for the team. Struggling going into 26. We don't know what to expect. We're losing a key piece. Is it bad? We'll see. We signed Conrad Wallem. Is it really good? We assume so. We'll see. Preseason is the time for stepping back, having these reactions, but at the same time, remembering we'll see. And that's what we'll do going into this coming week and going into the next few weeks. On Flyover Footy, I thank you for joining me. My name is Matt Baker, and we'll see. Go City.